We made a bigger version of the battery that can power 50 to 100 phones at a time. And this was devices that we sent to the Western region, the Eastern region, where communities where there was no electricity can come to these areas and plug their phones in and get a charge. And farmers and small store owners in the rural areas really loved that solution. The energy storage solution that African developed was actually used in Nepal during the rescue.
Wow.
And here's another interesting part of it.
Hold up. You got to repeat that one.
The average family, a household of 3, 4, or 5 in Ghana and across Africa consume the same amount of energy that one fridge in a home in the US consume in a year.
Wow. So, man, your backstory and everything that you've done with that is so amazing. This is season 3 of GWP. Major thank you to our audio engineer, Jomar Cardoza, and our video technician, Greg Scafidi. Welcome to an intriguing episode of GWP, where we embark on a captivating journey with my dear friend, Paul-Miki Akpablie. As fellow entrepreneurs hailing from Ghana, our shared roots have forged a bond grounded in ambition and determination. Join us as we unravel the visionary outlook of Paul, a serial entrepreneur at the helm of ACOs in the food and beverage industry. Delving into his aspirations for the future, we explore his dynamic perspectives on education, drawing inspiration from trailblazers like Mark Zuckerberg. But this episode isn't just about business insights. No. It's a personal journey through Paul's experiences. He generously imparts invaluable advice for young entrepreneurs like you and candidly discusses the dichotomy of growth versus fixed mindsets, pivotal for success. In a rare and candid moment, Paul graciously shares untold stories, delving into the importance of mentorship and his profound methods for recharging when the entrepreneurial journey takes its toll. Get ready for an engaging and enlightening conversation as Paul opens up in ways he never has before. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Man, Paul, so the first time I met you, right, it was myself and my friend Giovanni Gillis, who lives in the East Coast. He's been on the podcast before. If you haven't listened to that episode, definitely listen to that episode with Giovanni Gillis. Super smart guy, intelligent entrepreneur as well. But we were out on a Friday night hanging out, and I saw a mutual friend, Danielle, and we linked up. And since then, I was like, man, I got to get Paul on my podcast, and I've been looking forward to that opportunity. And I'm so excited that when I reached out to you, you were so open to it. I know you're a busy man. You're a man of many, many endeavors, especially entrepreneurial, which we're going to dive into a lot of that. But first off, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. You were even telling me today you've been inside all day just working, and you made time to come and talk to us today. So we really appreciate you being here.
No, absolutely. And I love what the podcast stands for. So, and I love talking about entrepreneurship. So when you reached out, I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing we share in common is also you're from Ghana. I'm from Ghana. So, back home, I think entrepreneurship is sort of like the backbone of Ghana, right? If you're listening to this podcast and you've ever been to Ghana, if you're in Ghana, you know the vibes. You know what I'm talking about. You go anywhere and they're selling something, right? It's so entrepreneurial. And so coming from Ghana, how did that, inspire you to sort of start to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it started with my mom, actually. So my mom has this business that she get like food products from the rural areas and sell it in the cities. And she's been doing that even before I was born. It was actually handed down from my grandmother. And you know, growing up in Ghana, when you have parents like that are just like really hustling, the moment you start working, they kind of plug you into that. So that was like kind of where the seed for entrepreneurship kind of got sown. And at that time, it was more like I was just helping my mom so she could, pay for my fees and being able to afford food and a lot of things. And then later, I moved out of Ghana and moved to Hong Kong in the US. That's when I realized that it's called entrepreneurship. So, yeah, you're right. We don't really call it entrepreneurship, but it's basically the way of life in Ghana. And that's what a lot of us saw growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like, to your point, right, this seed was planted early for you.
Yep.
And as I was looking at your story, it looks like you've had some early ventures, right?
Yep.
So you're the founder of Akos,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And you've had other ventures, which
Yep.
I'm going to allow you to dive into.
Yep.
One of your ventures that I saw is, I think you created this thing where it creates light
Yep.
for places where there's no light. I was
Yep.
like, this guy is literally lighting up the world. Talk about that. How has that got you to this point?
Yeah. So, my previous company, which I started in college, just at age 20, was Kadi Energy. And we're one of the first companies on the continent, like focus on storage. So energy storage, instead of everyone was focused on solar. At that point, because I grew up and my family, when I was growing up, didn't really have electricity. We got electricity at like the latter stage. So when we were kids, it was just like mostly studying with candles or going to a nearby house where they had electricity. And so seeing that problem and then having the unique opportunity to go to a high school in Hong Kong, at first I thought like that's the norm, that everywhere in the world it's like some people have power and other people don't. And when I went to Hong Kong and I was there for like 2 years and we only had like power outage once, and that was not even like across Hong Kong, but just our campus, because like there's a issue with the transformer. I was like, there got to be a better way, and I wanted to be part of the energy future of Africa. And at that point, I actually didn't really know what I was getting into. But when I was growing up, there are a lot of you probably know this as well. There are a lot of folks that travel down to Ghana to do a lot of projects, right? And one of the projects in my village was solar. They had a community solar system. And when these folks install that and they leave, like there's really no one in the village to maintain that. But growing up, I've always loved science. And so I kind of got plugged into that very early. And so when I moved to the US, like a lot of things just aligned for me to start, putting myself on that path to figure out how I can be part of the solution. And so that was kind of how, Kadi Energy started. And we just basically built like very innovative battery storage solutions for more rural applications. So for people to power their phones. And we even ventured into more business applications. So people who are even connected to the grid can have power when they need it. And that's kind of how we started. And the journey was just so humbling, and seeing families being like, oh, this is like a great solution for me. I think that was really impressive. And over time, we got even really great feedback from the community on how we could make this helpful. So instead of one-off purchases, we even started a program where we're building a for-profit model. So we made a bigger version of the battery that can power 50 to 100 phones at a time. And this was devices that we sent to the Western region, the Eastern region, where communities where there was no electricity can come to these areas and plug their phones in and get a charge. And farmers and small store owners in the rural areas really loved that solution.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive, because one of the things that I'm really inspired by is the opportunity to create change in Africa, right?
Yeah.
So recently, I've actually been going to Ghana more often. But before I started going more often, it took me 10 years before I went back after I came to the US.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about being in Hong Kong. When I think of my journey, I grew up in Ghana, moved here when I was 17. Huge culture shock when I moved here. I mean, when I would speak in class, people would start laughing because of my accent and all that. And I never understood what was going on.
Right.
I quite remember I had a math teacher who was from Ukraine. And because he was from Ukraine, he had a very thick accent. And as soon as he spoke, everyone would start laughing also. So I started to realize, oh God, they're laughing because of his accent, and they're also laughing at me because of my accent. So eventually me and this teacher just became buddies, right? Because like we were just getting bullied together every single day.
Right.
So I quite remember one time he walks up to me and he's like, hey, you, everyone laughs. Why are you not laughing?
Right.
And I looked at him, and in my head, I'm like, bro, they're laughing at us. Like, we're in this together. We're homies, you know. But talk about your experience, right? Like moving here, you know, not even moving here, but moving to Hong Kong. I mean, that's super different. That's a different language, a whole thing. What was that experience like?
It was a really great experience. So I moved to Hong Kong through the United World College program. So the program was started after the Second World War, kind of using education to unite countries. So you go there to represent your country. And Ghana always have 5 spots, and Hong Kong happens to be one of them. And I was one of the people selected from Ghana, and they just gave me Hong Kong. And honestly, like my family, like my dad didn't want me to go there because he knew China, he knew Japan, he knew US, Canada, and we have schools in like 20 different countries. And he was like, wait, where is Hong Kong? And it took a little bit of convincing to help him understand that what Hong Kong, the school in Hong Kong is one of the best in STEM. And given that, like, I was very strong in STEM, they think like that would be like a great spot for me. And I remember just like getting on an airplane. This was not my proudest moment, but that was my first time. I think I was 16 or 17. That was my first time ever stepping on an airplane. And I was trying to decide, like, you know, Ghana is very Christian and we go to church every Sunday, and that's like, church is like a fashion show where you bring in your new, well-designed clothes and all of that. And so I was like, ooh, I'm flying all the way to Hong Kong. I remember my dad got me like a pink suit one of those Steve Harvey type of suits that I put on, and I arrived in Hong Kong. And obviously, like, I was the only one from Ghana from my year, like, going there, but they coordinate all our arrivals. So there are people from Pakistan, people from the US. So we all arrived in the Hong Kong airport, and we had to find each other so the shuttle can take us. And everyone was just like wearing t-shirt, and they're like, who is this guy? Like pink suit, tie, and so that was the big cultural shock for me. And once, I got kind of integrated into, we did the IB, so the British system. So the whole education was still in English. And you're supposed to, like, obviously take another language. And I did French. And yeah, to your point, I was fortunate enough that in that space, there were so many accents that, like, no one really cared, right? There were people from China. There were people from Kyrgyzstan, there are people from Russia, and we have like over 50 different countries represented in that school. So at least it was kind of like a melting pot where, you have the Americans and the British with, who have their own thing going on, and you also have like a lot of Africans. So I didn't feel the impact of the accent as much, but I did feel the impact of how different the educational system is. doing English A1, which is literature, where you would have to read books and write an analysis of the story and all of that. And coming from a Ghanaian system where it's like you memorize a lot of science, and our English is more like, yeah, you write a story or something, but it's like past tense, mostly focused on that. So that was the big cultural shock for me, where I had to quickly relearn how to learn biology, how to learn chemistry, how to learn like English. And so that was the biggest struggle for the first few months. And over time, I just learned to like actually adapt to that.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, right? Because I'm sure a lot of people that listen to our podcast have had to assimilate into a different culture.
Yep.
And when you talk about relearning,
Yep.
you know, that's huge, right? Like you're only 17,
Yep.
you're in a whole new place, and you sort of have to relearn all these things. And
without your parents too. It's a boarding school, and you're in a faraway country by yourself, and and your day to day is all you. And because most teenagers in other countries are like in their parents' home still, but you're basically having to take care of what you eat, like make sure you stay out of trouble. And so, it was really hard at first, but over time, you basically begin to build that set of independence, and that made it so much easier.
Wow. And speaking of boarding schools, I had my first share experience of boarding schools. So in Ghana, I actually went to a boarding school called Radiant Way. And I went when I was really young. I was so little at that time. And man, that shaped me in so many different ways. I quite remember we had, in the boarding school, you have a house master. So it's like someone that takes care of you, and, and then the girls would have a house mistress.
Yep.
But I quite remember our house master, his name was Mr. Nsia. And he would always say, you kids, you don't appreciate me. But one day, you guys are literally going to look for me and come say thank you. Because this guy, his whole thing was just discipline. He would beat you and get you set straight.
Yep.
And we didn't like this guy. And he's like, you guys don't like me? Guess what? There's people that are 25 years older than you. They come back here and they come and say thank you to me because, I made them great, responsible people. When I think back today, he's absolutely right. Yep. If I could find him today, I would literally give him his flowers because, man, that shaped us in so many ways. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I had similar experience because I did my first 2 years of high school in Ghana. So I went to St. Peter's, which was in Kwetia, so up in the mountain. And like till today, my favorite or my best subject through high school and college was chemistry. And it's because the chemistry teacher was from my region, the Volta region. And when it comes to discipline, when you're walking and people see him coming, they just go the other way. And that forced me to like really learn and make sure I have the best grades I can, right? So to your point, now I still remember him because a lot of the discipline, like how to study chemistry and all of that, really, really shaped my love for science, essentially.
Yeah. Man, mentorship is something that we talk about a lot on this podcast. And so what we're basically doing right now is giving flowers to some of our mentors who were mentoring us in so many different ways at the time. We didn't even know what mentorship was, you know?
Absolutely.
So, man, shout outs to all the people that are doing work to help shape the futures of people that are coming up, especially the teachers that are out there, all these role models that are, setting great examples for us to be able to follow. We really appreciate you guys. So keep that up. Yep. Man, so Paul, I want to go back to something you mentioned when you were talking about Kadi Energy, when you were creating it. When I think of that project, it looks like you have a passion to solve problems for underserved communities, right? And not only did you create a small device, but you magnified it and made it bigger so that it's able to charge more phones, 20 phones, Talk about what is your inspiration in terms of like, serving underserved communities?
Yeah, I think my primary belief is like I always want to be involved in things that the economics and the social impact are not in conflict with each other, but are kind of intertwined. So innovations that help improve people's lives, but also it gives the right kind of financial return. And I learned this at a very early age because growing up so my mom actually didn't go to school. She stopped school when she had me and had this business, so she doesn't really read or write. And she had this thing where we're only like two boys for her. And she would go to the rural areas and would bring a girl who, in most cases, either orphans or like their parents left them. And my mom will literally pay for their education, will let them stay with us. And when you see how she interact with them and us, they're like, oh, that's her daughter, right? And as a kid, I hated that because I'm like, we don't have that much. We're barely making a living. And my mom always told me that, look, like, she doesn't want what happened to her to happen to these girls, right? She want to give them a better future. And she imagined what she would have done for the world if she had the opportunity to have, she always wanted to be a nurse. And it's not surprising that two of the girls are nurses now. And so as I move to Hong Kong, as I grow, I begin to connect the dots a little bit. That life is not just about your personal mobility, but also how do you bring others on that journey. And so that was why when I was thinking about what is a problem that I wanted to solve and something or an issue from my home country, Ghana, I thought about a problem that was close to my heart. And that was like, there are a lot of families at that time without access to electricity. And this was like prime doomsday time where like you're here and the light is off. And my main focus was, well, if really we are seeing this uptake in mobile revolution, right? Everyone has a mobile phone. That is the number one device for these people where they can access healthcare services, they can access financial services, they can stay in touch with their community. And if charging them at that time, and I'm going to throw some interesting stats here. Do you know that, I mean, it has probably changed a little bit, but at that time where we're building Kadi Energy, the average African or Ghanaian pays 380 times more what people in US and the more developed market pays for electricity.
Wow.
That to me is really insane. And here's another interesting part of it. The average family across Africa consume the same amount of energy one fridge in the corner of a home in the US consume in a year.
Hold up. You got to repeat that one.
The average family of a household of 3, 4, or 5 in Ghana and across Africa consume the same amount of energy that one fridge in a home in the US consume in a year.
Wow.
So take out lights, take out TV, take out everything, take out toasters and all of that. So I just thought as a 17-year-old and 20-year-old at that point looking into this, that doesn't feel right to me. And when I see things like that, I'm just so energized to want to find a solution. And energy access is such a complex problem. And Ghana has it's been a journey. Mm-hmm. But we're still not there. It's still a massive problem. And I'm of the belief that energy access is the biggest differentiator of the developed market versus the developing market, because that is what spurs innovation.
It powers the economy.
Right. How can we do this podcast without electricity, right?
Yep.
How can you sell things if you can't get online, right? And so at that point, that was my vision. And it all started with seeing my mom trying to solve problems for people who she didn't even know. And I just took that as inspiration until today. That has been the driving force of everything that I've been involved in, be it in healthcare, be it in technology. I think my life mission is about building for I call them the underdogs, because that is where I personally see the biggest opportunity, and I was one of those underdogs.
Yeah, man, I'm getting the chills right now. You're such an inspirational speaker, man. And now, the one thing. Imagine entrepreneurship as a roller coaster ride in a bustling amusement park. You board the entrepreneurial coaster, filled with exhilarating highs and stomach-churning lows. At times, you're soaring sky high, feeling the rush of success, while others, you plummet into daunting dips and unexpected twists. Now, amidst this thrilling ride, you discover that conventional strategies alone won't suffice. To weather the ups and downs, you need some unconventional tricks up your sleeve, much like the hidden shortcuts and secret passages in the amusement park. So here are some tips. Tip number 1, the power of play. Just as seasonal writers anticipate turns, embrace the unexpected by approaching challenges playfully. Experiment, pivot, and explore new ways with childlike curiosity. Keep listening for more tips. Back to the episode with Paul. So, man, your backstory and everything that you've done with that is so amazing. What I love most about your story is you're solution oriented.
Yep.
There's so many people in this world that are very good at identifying the problems. Mm-hmm. Very few people are able to take the necessary action required to solve the problem. So I want to take my hats off to you. Yep. Man, great job. And I love the impact of your work, because it's not local, it's global. Right. You know, you're solving problems in Africa and you're doing global things. Yep. Speaking of global things, you've picked up another problem that you're solving now, which is ACOS. Yep. Tell us about that journey. You know, what's the backstory on, you know, you did Kadi Energy, solved a huge problem, and now you're working on ACOS, which is in the food and beverage industry. Yep. What inspires you to tackle that specific problem?
Yeah. So if you look at the theme, like across all the things I've been involved in, it's all things that like I've encountered personally. So I think when we started the podcast, I mentioned that my mom buys food products and then sell them in the cities, right? Because, you know, coming from Ghana, we love food, right? And so I've seen firsthand the challenge of everyone needs to eat. Like, we need to eat every day. But our food system globally is broken. And everyone is aware of that, but there has not been like a great solution. And I think it's going to take so many different solutions to tackle a problem as big as, food and beverage supply chain globally. But the problem I identified was similar to my mom. When I moved to the US, there are a lot of minority brands, a lot of small food and beverage brands that sell into retail. So you go to Target, you pick up the snacks and drinks and all of that. And the challenge is for if you look at the tech stack that these food and beverage brands use to sell into retail, it looks like what it was 20 years ago. Can you believe that Target, Walmart would send a large purchase order to a company that manufactured chips in the form of PDF through the email? Hey, we want $2 million worth of these chips, and it's a PDF, and these are the terms, and have a nice day. And now these brands then have to take that PDF and then figure out what to do with it. So, and that's one part of it. And the other part is just like, we also have a system where like the retailers, there are only a small number of them, but they're so big, and the brands that sell into them are like small, but there are a lot of them. So there's just like an asymmetric power where these brands have to find their own money, make the product, ship it to Target, and wait another 30 to 45 days before Target actually pays them. And so when you look at their cash conversion cycle from when they put in money versus when they get it, it's like it could go up to about 120 days. So the question is, where are they getting the money from? Because banks will not finance that, right? So that was kind of what spurs the foundation of ACOS, that we're basically building a modern tech stack that sit between these consumer brands and their retailers. So the whole order fulfillment process, the whole payments, and all of those pieces are all digitized, because we're living in a world where these folks have to compete with Amazon, and Amazon has a very well streamlined infrastructure, right? You can order, pay, and have things delivered to you in 2 days. And we still need retail, right? You still need to be able to go to Safeway, and so really the vision here is that if we can build the modern tools that enable these brands to scale in retail, these products can be available to the people in New Jersey, in other markets, because Amazon is mostly used by folks in San Francisco, in New York, in like the more tech and the higher income families across America. But as you go to, I call it pockets of emerging markets. So America also have pockets of emerging market. When you go to those areas where Target and Walmart and like that's where they get everything, it's really important that we begin to build better tools that empower these brands to succeed in these physical stores that are the only outlet that most of the 90% of the population of America interact with this product. And it's been just a humbling journey building that. And it's been just a year, but now, yeah, we work with brands that sell into Target, Whole Foods, and even work with some of the large distributors across the country. And really, obviously, it's starting in the U.S., but the goal here is that over time, we can build the kind of infrastructure that will enable us to replicate this model in other markets as well. Because as you probably know, even in Ghana, the economy is going through a lot of transition where now people are going to Accra Mall to buy they're no longer using the traditional markets. And so as that develop, we're going to run into the same issue. How do you help people like my mom to push their products into this physical retail so people can easily access them? And ACOS is essentially going to be that tool.
Yeah. ACOS. Make sure you remember that name. ACOS. That's the name of the brand that's solving another huge problem. Yep. So the trend that I'm seeing here is you pick problems specifically in underserved communities, and then you begin to solve them in a very massive way. You're doing that with ACOS.
Yep.
Can you tell us any success stories that you've had let's say, any small brand that you've been able to
Yep.
to help elevate, especially a small brand from an underserved community?
Yeah, so we have a little over 30 brands on the platform. Some of the most popular ones we've worked with will be Waku. Waku, they make this no sugar probiotic drink, and their origin is from Ecuador. And they are in Northeast Whole Foods and now rolling out nationally. And it's just been really impressive, how, they use echoes in scaling that. We also have a brand called Freshly, which is, it was founded by Paul Owusu. He's also from Ghana. Also it's a canned cocktail company, and really focus on like breeding those cocktails that you can just sip, like low alcohol, like not like you drink a cocktail and you're wasted, but more like you sip it, you can have it on an airline, you can have it casually, like almost like a beer type alcohol percentage cocktail. And those are flying off the shelf as well. And we also recently started working with Ghost Town Oats. They make like oat milk and work with a lot of coffee shops. And funny enough, Ghost Town Oats is also backed by Jimmy Butler. So that was really interesting too, because he's a lot into like coffee and oat milk and stuff like that. But we're growing rapidly. We have a Filipino brand that is also joining the platform, and we have also like a Sip Herbal, which is tea, and they actually source some of their tea ingredients from Africa. We've also worked with Mighty Peace Coffee. So if you had any coffee from Africa and the US, they're a big player. They get coffee from Congo and from across Ethiopia and from across the continent. So it's just been really humbling that, you might hear the story and be like, oh, Paul, you're building a modern tool for food and beverage brands in the US. But when you look at our user base, you begin to see a theme there. And that's more like a lot of it are minority owned. And a lot of it is focused on these new and emerging brands that are bringing new flavors into the American homes. Because that's a theme that we are seeing across the food and beverage category, where more and more Americans want to try things from Ghana, want to try things from across the world. And so even though all of these businesses are US companies, it's so interesting that a lot of them are either bringing very interesting flavors or have some type of global supply chain.
Yeah. Wow, man, this is impressive. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
This portfolio of brands you have going on here, I suspect this is going to continue to get bigger because I think your mission is so powerful.
Yep.
One thing we talk about on GWP podcast is building wealth. Mm-hmm. And very recently, I was just talking about this on the episode with Marvin Jones. And one of the things we talked about is how starting a business is an important way to build wealth. Yep. And the example that I used in that episode is if I have a job, I can work 40, 80 hours. My salary is 110,000 or something, right? That's my salary. Right. I'm capped. There's no such thing as, hey, I made 110,000. Can I make another 20,000? Yep. There's no such thing unless I create my own opportunities. Yep. But starting a business sort of removes that cap where you have these unlimited opportunities. Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of people that listen to our podcast are wondering, they want to start a business, but they probably don't know how to start. Yep. You seem to have the formula. Yep. Talk about how do you go about fusing, purpose, social change, innovation to actually find a problem to solve?
Yeah, I think it's really important to basically find problems or tackle problems that you're passionate about. Because the thing about entrepreneurship, like what you said, is like the reward is enormous, right? So if you, for example, start one company that end up being very successful, you could retire. You're pretty much done. Or you could even start more if you wanted to. But there's also a lot of risk, right? That leaving the regular paycheck for entrepreneurship is not easy, which is why I always advise people that let it be something that you wake up in the morning and you're really excited to do. If it's not, you get burned out really quickly. And so my playbook has always been, if the problem is a problem that I'm super passionate about, whether energy access or building a better food and beverage system, that North Star and that passion makes the journey a lot easier and makes the lows a lot easier to manage, right? And that is really important for anyone trying to embark on entrepreneurship. It's what I call problem founder fit. For example, like I can't just stand up today and be like, oh, I'm building this thing for this vertical, right? Like I was building like something in energy because I've encountered that problem firsthand, right? And I'm building something in food and beverage right now because my mom has been in that space and I've spent enough time in the space to understand that it's a big enough problem that needs to be solved. And so when that passion is there, it makes everything so much easier.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. And one thing you mentioned, though, is the risk involved, right? So a lot of people would love to start a business today, tomorrow, and so on.
Yeah.
But as you know, when you start a business, it takes a while, right, before it gains any traction, customers, and so on. And so the easy solution there is to gravitate towards the safety net, which is being employed. Your paycheck comes every Friday. You don't got to worry about it. You know, you're not worried about checking whether you have the passion for the job or not. You're going to show up every single day because you have to clock in. How do you manage that, right? So for someone that's, for example, maybe they're in corporate America right now, and they probably see a problem in their community that they want to solve, but they're sort of like in the shackles right now where they're like, okay, if I leave this full-time job, how am I going to pay for this? But I also want to solve this problem. So they're in this conflict. How do you manage that? How should someone be thinking through this problem right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I always encourage everyone to find their own path, right? And like you rightly pointed out, the risk is even more enormous for minorities and people from certain background, where coming from Ghana, when you come to the US, what does everyone think? You've made it. You have a lot of money. And now, like, I have to support my mom. I have to support my, siblings. I have to support my extended family. Like, and that makes it really, really hard, right? Because if I have the opportunity to have a regular paycheck, that to me is easier, right? Because you have the resources to support these people. But when you have these people and you have these people you have to take care of, and also looking at the financial situation with entrepreneurship, where it's like you grind for so many years and fingers crossed it just works out. And when it works out, those returns are massive. It's not an easy journey. So I encourage everyone to basically figure out their own path, because folks will tell you, oh, if you have an idea, quit your job, go do it. But when you look at a lot of the founders that we hear about in the media that we see every day, these are people who can be like, oh, I was living in my parents' basement whilst I was building this. Or some people have their family's credit card that they can swipe for food as they're embarking on entrepreneurship, right? And so I always encourage a lot of minority folks when they're venturing into entrepreneurship, it's like, do it your own way. Figure out what makes sense. If you really need to keep your job as you're laying the foundation for like what you want to build, absolutely do it. If you can make that drastic switch and still be okay financially, like do it. But I don't think it's okay that I think the notion there is that like minority founders have to follow this path where it's like, yeah, go to the garage and grind every day to build a company, because that assumes everyone is in the same financial position. So I encourage everyone to figure out your financial position, your professional trajectory, and really think critically about if this journey makes sense, and not just be like, oh, it's really cool being a co-founder and CEO of your own company or founder and CEO of your own company, because it's not worth it in that sense. You have to really think about the path, the risk involved, and the day-to-day, and how challenging it is to like build something from the ground up whilst keeping that vision like 5 to 10 years from now in mind. Is no joke. And so yeah, I always encourage people to figure out their own path and be motivated to stay on that path and be grounded enough to ignore all the noise. Because I always say entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. And we're seeing way too much sprints lately that encourage the next wave of entrepreneurs to focus on like, it's okay if it takes 10 years. It's okay if it takes 20 years. So far as you're on the journey and you're motivated and it seems like certain elements are working, be on that journey and enjoy every bit of it.
Yeah. Hey, dear listener. If you like this episode, you will enjoy my conversation with Professor Eric Bell. We dive into the top 6 financial wellness hacks. Be sure to have a listen after this episode. Man, so much to unpack there with everything you've just said. Yep. So in today's world of social media, yep, where there's, the concept of delayed gratification almost doesn't exist, right? I can just press a button and yep, I can have my stuff shipped to me within 24 hours. Yep. So quick. And so having that patience to be able to grind through something almost doesn't exist anymore. Yep. And you've been an entrepreneur. You're a lifelong entrepreneur. Yep. You know the average business does not generate any profit at least between 3 to 5 years. Yep. That's sort of like the hallmark. Yep. Right. And so if you're thinking of starting something right now, definitely something to keep in mind. Yep. You need to be in it for the long haul. Yeah. But also one thing that I wanted to dive further into with everything that you just mentioned right now is the challenges involved. Yep. You're a lifelong entrepreneur. Yep. Talk about some of the challenges that you faced, especially when you're trying to innovate. Yep. You've innovated in terms of creating Kadi energy, right? You've innovated in terms of what you're doing in the food and beverage industry. Yep. What are some of the challenges you run into when you're trying to innovate in whether it's an industry or globally or locally? Yep.
Well, the first one was, look, I was starting a hardware company in Africa around 2012, 2013. Imagine asking, most investors who invest in businesses are more in the developed markets, US, Europe, like certain parts of Asia. Imagine asking them for money to build hardware in Africa. Again, let me emphasize that hardware is already hard. A lot of VCs don't put money into that. And you're also talking about 2012, 2013, when the continent at that point, entrepreneurship, this is when Jumia and all of these guys were emerging. Like the whole concept of VC investing we're just waking up and warming up to it. When you combine those two, it was incredibly difficult. I've talked to the World Bank, the IFC, the Bill Gates Foundation. I went to all of them and I told them that, look, it's going to take an African like me, a young entrepreneur African like me, to solve the energy problem in Africa. Because what I was seeing in the media every time at that point was I was struggling trying to raise money to build this. And then every day there was a white founder who was traveling in Kenya, saw energy situation, makes a panel, and then they raise 50 million, 100 million. Gates Foundation put so much money behind them. And that was not really empowering. And so I had to figure out another path, which was, how do I bootstrap this business? And so right off the bat, we had to think about our unit economics. We have to think about our business model as a whole, which is why we even, to increase the profitability, we're like, well, instead of having one-off batteries that these people purchase, and we make about 70% margin, why not have these community charging stations which charge 50 to 100 phones a day? We recoup whatever investment that we put into these batteries in about 6 to 9 months. But these batteries last for 5 years. And that model also gives us the ability to serve more folks that could not put $12 or $15 to buy a power bank. And so the biggest challenge at that point was, one, it was incredibly hard to raise capital. And so we had to find a way to build very good foundation, business model. And I was also fortunate enough that I won a pitch competition in my college, and also my uncle put in some funds to get us started. And that was the start of the journey. And having that support made the journey a lot easier. And the second challenge I faced also is, if you look at the energy market across Africa, there are a lot of grown men and women trying to solve this problem. And at that point, I was only 20. So when they look at me, they're like, we went and we met with the Energy Commission of Ghana, and we're talking about, hey, we could even build these battery systems into residential applications to help stabilize and feed into the grid when you need it. And it's really hard. I literally have to drag my uncle along before they would take a meeting. And I'm like, I don't think these folks realize that, one, Africa has the largest youth population. And we need to create that environment or that space for a lot of young folks like me and you to start taking those complex problems, because that's what we need to move the continent forward. We can't always expect that someone who is 50 or 60-year-old is going to solve some of these problems, because it takes the young minds that are abreast with these technologies to innovate. And you can look at the US and look at Mark Zuckerberg, all of these people, how they started young and how they were fortunate enough that people are just oh, you're 19, here we celebrate. If you're 16 and you start a company, people are like, oh man, they will even encourage you to drop out of school to do it. But in our market, the biggest challenge was that people equate age with wisdom or success. And so that was one of the other biggest challenges. So the two were one, inadequate resources, and then the other one was just some of the notion around entrepreneurship and the lack of buy-in from a lot of players that could have supported. And when you now shift to Echoes, it's quite similar problem. We're fortunate enough that we've raised capital this time around, and that's enabled us to build fast and put all the things in place to make sure the company succeed. But yeah, I wouldn't have done it without Bracken Darrell. So Bracken Darrell was the CEO for Logitech. Now he's the CEO for VF. So VF owns Vans and I think 10 or 12 different brands.
Vanity Fair.
Yep. And he's more like a dad to me. And he gave me my first check. And I was just so fascinating how he's just like, Paul, the star here is you. Like, anything you're working on, just let me know. And I'll make sure to put the resources behind it. And I imagine where, and to your point around mentorship, I think, especially for minority folks with limited resources, it's really, really hard that it require folks like Bracken, even some of our early investors who, like Charles Hudson from Precursor Ventures, to see beyond that. Be like, hey, we believe in this person, and they're going to figure out, because as you probably know, less than 1% of venture capital financing goes to Black and minority folks, right? So,
especially women.
And so having people like that who can take that gamble, I think it's huge. And so, yeah, it's been a very humbling journey moving from Kadi Energy, where we're not able to raise venture money, to now Echoes, where we've been able to raise venture. And the problems and challenges, honestly, are very different. When you're bootstrapping, it's like be on your own path, figure it out. When it's venture, there are a lot of expectations around growth, around, where you should be at any point in time. And it's just been like a humbling experience to basically see both sides of the coin. And so I'm able to advise other entrepreneurs on whether it makes sense to bootstrap or whether it makes sense to go the venture route, and how they can evaluate those options effectively.
Yeah, man, that's so amazing. So a couple of things that I want us to talk about here, right, is you talk about, for example, when you're solving that problem with Kadi Energy,
yep,
where you're trying to raise capital, you went to Bill Gates
yep,
Foundation, try to raise capital,
yep,
went to the ECG, Ghana
yep,
Electric Company, to try to raise funds and
yep,
let people realize what the problem is that you're trying to solve.
Yep.
And sometimes it's hard for people to see where you're trying to go, which
Right.
is, it's hard for people to see the vision
Right.
that you have.
Right.
Talk about that as an entrepreneur.
Right.
Sometimes there's a vision you have in mind where you want to go. There's a problem you want to solve.
Yep.
Even when you're talking to VCs, for example, when you're
Yep.
trying to raise all this capital,
Yep.
there's a vision. There's somewhere you want to go, and people may not be able to see it.
Right.
How do you get people to come on board and be able to buy into your ideas?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is like the hallmark of entrepreneurship, right? When you're starting anything, you have to have that audacious belief that something is going to happen. And when it happens, that's when people get those outsized returns. And when it doesn't happen, that's when you have the losses. And that's just the rule of the game. And so when you're talking to VCs and all of that, it's one, helping them understand why that future is very important. In our case, it's more like we all eat every day. And I even give the analogy that you had coffee today. Just because you're able to pay for it doesn't mean our food system is working, right? And so the more you can relate it to their experience and their journey or their day-to-day, the better. And we can tell stories of you go somewhere, and if you show them like how that changes their lives, they're more open to see that vision. And also we're all living in the same world. And so there are themes and there are internet digitization. There are things that you can hear it and it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer when I'm telling you that our food and beverage system is broken, and with now more focus on digitization of legacy industries, and couple that with AI applications, that the only way AI applications can come into these legacy industries is if we build a better data structure where orders in PDF makes absolutely no sense. It should all be digitized in a way that that data is all structured. Now you can put AI on top of that, and then you can have that cup of coffee for 50% less the price that we're currently paying for it. We can move goods more effectively. We can reduce waste, right? And so it's really important to help these VCs understand, one, how that vision of the future is important, and also try to relate it to them as much as possible. Because most VCs tend to they also want to be experts in the industries that they invest in. So the more you can align that with what they know, the better. Because if they don't know about space, it's going to be really hard for you to sell that VC on a space tech. And that was the challenge with Kadi Energy as well, that when we were building this, right, it would take an African VC to see that, oh, the energy problem in Africa, Ghana and Africa as a whole, is a massive problem. Because when you're telling them that, hey, there are a lot of houses without electricity, they're like, that must be like a political problem. But it's really not. And it takes that fundamental market knowledge to make those bets. And so, so it's a combination of being able to really solve them well in the vision, and two, also being able to help them align more with how that impacts how they see the future as well.
Yeah. And I think, so usually as an entrepreneur also, when you decide a problem to solve, let's say the problem you want to solve is a social problem, right? Yep. Such as providing energy for somewhere in Africa. Yep. Might be social. You can also make it economic in some way, right? Because it's kind of related. But sometimes people who want to start businesses might think, if I'm solving a social problem, there's no financial opportunities with it, right? It has to sort of be like a nonprofit. If not, how do I solve a social problem and still be able to make money? Right. How should potential entrepreneurs think about this sort of problem?
Right. So for that, they have to make sure it's a problem that brings together the economics and the social, in a very nice way, and they're very intertwined in a very unique way. Because obviously nonprofit models are great, but obviously it hasn't benefited the African continent that much. We deployed so much in debt to, or in financing to all of these nonprofits, but not really sustainable long term, right? You have these projects that go on for 2 years, with Gates Foundation, with the World Bank, and then they leave. And then in 5 years, they come with another grants for. So there's a model in which that helps, but to your point, we need that economics elements as well. So I always encourage entrepreneurs that when you're looking at tackling problems, it's really important to deeply understand the problem and how, by having better unit economics, you can better position your solution to have a much bigger impact. Because it's not every problem that you can just slap a business model on it and then it's going to be successful, right? So you have to really think, is this really the problem that's going to make enough returns? Because think about it, it's those returns that you use to amplify and scale. And that's the challenge with nonprofit, that even if you put a solar on all of this small, every home in this small community, then it will require trillions of dollars to get the whole world electrified, right? But if we create a model where, oh, with my 25 cents, I can pay for electricity, and then you're making margins, then you're better positioned to take those returns and then keep investing in the infrastructure needed to replicate that solution at a bigger scale.
Yeah, which is really important, because the sustainability, I think the sustainability is actually more important than actually even starting the business in the first place.
Yep.
If you're not going to sustain it, just don't start it in the first place, you know? So, man, thank you so much for sharing that. Man, I think you're dropping so many gems on here, and we're so fortunate to be talking to you. So thank you for all that insight. And now, tip number 2, embrace the free fall. In those plunging moments, instead of fighting against gravity, lean into it. Embrace the uncertainty, for it often leads to unforeseen opportunities and growth. Now, back to the episode. Keep listening for the final tip. So, another thing that I wanted to shift into, we've kind of talked about it, which is the vision.
Yep.
But for ACOS, what's your long-term vision for this company?
Yeah. So, really the vision, obviously, with ACOS is like we're starting building like a modern like infrastructure that's sit between like food and beverage brands, but we kind of call it consumer brands, and retailers. But really the goal is to basically build tools that live across the food and beverage supply chain. That if we can understand, starting from the top, who is purchasing products from these brands, and in the future dig deeper and understand where these brands are getting their supplies to make these products, imagine the impact, and also included in that is also how these products move. That to me is where is kind of how we build a resilient food and beverage system globally. Some stats I'll just share here is quite interesting is food and beverage industry in America alone is one of the largest industry in the world. Every year we spend over $1 trillion. That's more than the GDP of mostly like 99% of the countries in the world. But it hasn't seen that much digitization. It's still stuck in the old ways, even storing food products in warehouses that are getting bad and then they're wasting them. Why? Because we don't have enough data online to forecast, to understand how much food should be shipped to Target, how much. And so really the vision for ACOS is becoming that tool that helps us build a better food and beverage system from the consumer all the way down to the growers.
Yeah. And I was reading a blog on your website actually that talks about the supply chain system, right? From the farm to your table. There's so many stops in the supply chain that we don't even realize, right? Yep. And so it's amazing to see how you're sort of innovating and looking to make all these, changes that I think the world needs it. Food insecurity is a big problem that the world is going to be facing in the next few years.
Right.
And so the quicker we start to inject some of these technology, AI, and so on into these industries, the better we're going to be set up when those problems actually, become really unbearable.
Right.
Man, so it seems like your experiences have shaped your journey in so many ways.
Yep.
Coming from Ghana,
yep.
Your mom,
yep.
So many different things have shaped your perspective of the world and the problems that you solve. Education is also a really, really important aspect of, building and becoming who we are.
Yep.
You went to Stanford University, you got your MBA from there, right? You focused on computer science out there.
Yep.
A lot of people, Mark Zuckerberg is a good example, might say, you know what, man, why would you go to college? Just keep on moving, do something else, right?
Yep.
You might have a different perspective on that.
Yep.
Can you talk about how education has empowered you to be able to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be where I am today without education. And it's so shocking to me when I hear folks like, Peter Thiel saying, drop out of school, you finance your company, and there are people doing that. And I'm like, that makes sense, but that only works in America or maybe in Europe. Because growing up in Ghana, I've seen my mom, I've seen the challenge that she goes through. Like, she's been hustling the same business for over 20 years. And it's still like her retirements, like she's got none of that, right? And so she has to obviously depend on us, her children, to be able to create that future for her. And so to her, at an early stage, she was like, hey, really the only thing I can really leave you is good education, because that will open doors for you. So even though my mom didn't or doesn't read or write, it's like she'll wake me up at 3 a.m. to read my books, right? I remember in middle school, early, I was always top of the class, almost all the way through, middle school, throughout most of my entire education. And I remember one time, my average was 96, and then as you go higher, the courses are a little bit more difficult. So I remember one time the teacher came and said, oh, Paul's grade dropped. His average was 92. And my mom literally whooped my ass. And I was trying to help her, and because she was like, wait, they said it dropped. I'm like, yes, I was still in the first place, but it's just I'm in the upper class now, where it's the exams are a little bit more difficult. She didn't hear any of that. And I wouldn't have gone to Hong Kong if I wasn't good in school, because I was selected from a lot of students out of Ghana. I remember going to that exam with thousands of people going to write that exam, and then from that exam they take they shortlist 15 that goes for the interview, then they select 5, and it was all paid for. And then moving to college in Colorado College and starting my first company in college, and then moving to Stanford. And by the way, I did my MBA and MS in energy and resources, which I could only do because of my background in with Kadi Energy. And so to me, it's I wouldn't be where I am today without education. But I also see the opportunity that my path, I'm only here today because I looked beyond education. I started, I looked beyond the normal, classroom education. People are wait, you actually started a company whilst in college. I had even 2 student jobs, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. But to be honest with you, I learned so much about entrepreneurship by studying Kadi Energy, where I had no idea, than I learned in the classroom. And I feel I wouldn't have I got into Stanford Business School through deferred admission. So I got in straight out of college, which there are only a few, about 10 a class, because to get into the top MBA programs, you need at least 4 years of work experience. But they look at my path and they're like, whoa, like, and that's why I only took, and they gave me up to 4 years to enroll. So I could go anytime I wanted. And after 2 years, I was like, I was ready, right? And even now, being able to fundraise some of the investors that put money into my company are people who went to Stanford and have their own funds, right? And some of the angel investors are even from my college, Colorado College, right? And so education has opened a lot of doors. But I also think that just going through the normal, like, or excelling at math and science is not enough. You have to figure out a way to learn a lot of the practical elements of entrepreneurship, and all of that, you have to do it on your own.
Yeah. Oof, man. So if someone is listening right now and they're still doubting if, education is that important, I think your story speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. Thinking of being picked out of thousands and thousands of students to be part of the 15, yep. And then out of the 15, being picked out of that 15 again, having the opportunity to have a deferred admission at Stanford. Stanford is one of the most prestigious schools in the world. I watch their interviews all the time, view from the top. Yep. I literally sit and watch these things every single day. And the caliber of people that speak there, and the caliber of people that get to go there and having the opportunity to go there is really impressive. So, man.
I mean, look, we're both from Ghana, so you know what I'm talking about. Like, we're so used to, like, because I basically have 5 degrees. Like, did 2 degrees, like undergrad, did 2 masters, and also I have one from Cambridge on social change, which the royal family created for us as part of the Queen's Young Leaders program. But yeah, you're very familiar with Ghana growing up, and how even my uncle, who is a medical doctor, has 6 other degrees and still wants to go to school.
Wow.
Yep.
So the learning never really stops.
No.
Wow. That's amazing. So for young entrepreneurs, right, that are just getting started, how should they think about education?
I always think education is what you make it. I think the normal, like, classroom, like just math, science, I think lays the foundation for entrepreneurship. But I feel like if you want to go further, you have to look beyond that. You have to look for opportunities to learn outside of the classroom. Because even having gone through the MBA program at Stanford, no one really teaches you entrepreneurship, right? It's more focused on, they teach you the tools that you need to be an effective leader. And you can take that and package it into entrepreneurship. You can package it into running for president. You can package it into being a good employee, a good boss to someone else, right? And so I think it's what you make of it. I would say focus on that as the foundation, but look beyond the normal walls of the classroom. Get mentors, get folks, and learn more about things outside of the classroom, because that's really every day. Even with Echoes, there's so many things. You have to know how to manage people, how to keep emotions in check, how to keep finances, like, okay, how to do sales. Like, these are things that no one can sit you down and give you a blueprint. You have to learn on your own. So I would highly encourage people to don't slack, like, do what you have to do to succeed in school, but constantly look for opportunities to, as you're in school, learn other things outside of the classroom.
Yeah. And I think also as an entrepreneur, you need to have a growth mindset, right? So, you've had multiple experiences where, for example, your average was 96 and then it dropped to a 92. I'm very sure, very, very sure when it dropped, you were like, man, I'm getting this back up there. That's a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is, oh, man, it's at 92. I'm stuck at 92. It is what it is. For an entrepreneur, how important is it to have a growth mindset?
Look, you can't do entrepreneurship without growth mindset. Because once you uncover or discover a problem and you come up with a solution for it, only a small number of entrepreneurs can speak about the fact that, oh, I found a problem and I came up with a solution for it. And then in 10 years or 20 years, it's exactly that solution, right? It goes through a lot of iteration. And so at any point, as the idea begins to marinate a little bit more, you realize that as a leader, your role also begins to evolve. Where usually when you're just starting as a founder or co-founder, at that point, it's like even website, you're probably doing it, right? Just the little things you're like, wait, did I, like a whole CEO, but over time, it kind of changes. Then someone else is now doing website and you have no visibility into that or very limited visibility. At first, you are like doing payroll. Over time, you get like CPA or someone who does the payroll. And so you can't, like, your business is so evolving, and every day or every minute, there's just so many different things happening, and it requires you as a leader to also evolve, that if you don't have a growth mindset, one, your business is going to outgrow you. Or two, you just at some point going to feel like you're not putting the business in a good position. So growth mindset, also being comfortable being, what was the hardest thing? It's like you said, and I'll go back a little bit here. I remember even when I was growing up in the Volta region and the school in which I was, like, I was the top student or one of the top students from the region. And I went to St. Peter's, where it's like now students, St. Peter is one of the top schools, like high schools in Ghana, like especially for science, right? I went there and I remember we have like order of merit where they rank every student. And I remember the first one, like I was like 80 something. And because everyone was like, oh, this kid coming from the Volta region is like, we heard it's like very good in science. And I was like, whoa. And parents would come over, and I didn't want my mom or dad to see that. And I ended up like, really moving to really top 10. And it's the same thing I realized when I moved to Hong Kong, when I moved to Colorado College, when I moved to Stanford, that every environment I always need to assimilate first, and always have that growth mindset where it's like, I'm standing here, but I'm happier standing here and then looking back and being here, like up there, versus the other way. And that is, I guess, what makes me always want to go the entrepreneurial route versus actually working in corporate America, because I feel like I've interned at Google. I had the opportunity to go back there, and every day I just felt like I was flat, right? And that's a whole different personality. And so if you want to be an entrepreneur, trust me, you cannot be an entrepreneur without a growth mindset.
Yeah. Wow. You said it all. One of the things that, as I was gathering information I saw was, I was like, man, this guy is related to the royal family. And I was like, what's that about? You know, because I saw it and I was like, how does one become associated with the royal family? Talk about that. Like, how did that happen?
Look, it was very, very humbling. And so when I started Kadi Energy, obviously, like I just found a problem, and it was a problem that I was solving. And I didn't for one day think about the media, think about any award, think about anything. Like, I was just deeply passionate about, could this be a problem that is worth me putting my time into solving, and just kind of hit the road running. And it was just like a very humbling experience when the Queen started the late Queen Elizabeth II started the Queen's Young Leaders program. And really, when she turned 90, she was like, okay, what is going to be her legacy? What is she leaving behind across the Commonwealth? And her thought process was like, what if I bring together all of these young people, 18 to 29, from across the world, who are all doing impressive things to build that future that maybe she wouldn't get to see in her lifetime, but at least by putting her name or her brand behind them, they'll be well positioned to do that. So I heard about the program, and someone has to put your name in. So, did that. And then, got an interview they wanted to learn more about Kadi Energy and what we're doing at that point. And so, I just talked to them, spoke to them about what we're building. And then about a month later, I just got a call saying that I was one of the 60 young leaders selected from across the entire Commonwealth. And as part of that, they'll be flying me to the UK to receive the award. And when people see it online, people only see the award ceremony and the video of us going to receive the award. But it was a whole 2 weeks. They created a course for us with Cambridge on leading change, which was created only for the Queen's Young Leaders. We met with David Beckham, like all of these folks that like I only grew up, seeing on TV. Richard Branson and all of these guys, like
Sir Richard Branson.
Sir
No
Richard Branson.
way. No way.
Jimmy Choo.
Wow.
And, Prince Harry. Like all of these guys were all there, just super curious to dig deeper into our story and figure out how they can be part of that. And so it was really, really humbling being in London for 2 weeks and having that, I would say, white glove service. And being in the Buckingham Palace and, going to a bathroom and stealing one of their toilet paper. Because one of my friends wanted that. and someone was also like, don't wash your hands. I said, no, that. It's like, if after shaking her, don't wash your hands. So, after that, we heard so much. Like, there are a lot of folks that are like, wow, that's so impressive. And there are a lot of folks that are like, do we need like the Queen to, given the history with the Commonwealth, do we need the Queen to really endorse these people? And my response was, I was doing all of this in Ghana or across the continent, but not for once did even the government of Ghana. So I went to the when I was in the Buckingham Palace, I met the ambassador for Ghana, and he said the Queen was like, hey, you need to like talk to Paul, like what he's doing, like it's quite impressive. And we're having the chat, and I was like, it's so interesting that we need more and more leaders across the African continent to start celebrating these young leaders. There's no reason why the government of Ghana shouldn't have an entrepreneurial awards program where you bring 18 to 29, because that is like a huge part of the population in, and show appreciation for what they're doing, because that other young people seeing that, it's like, whoa, I want to be an entrepreneur too.
Yep.
And it's just quite unfortunate that across the continent, we haven't seen that many leaders embracing that. But it was a very humbling moment. And yeah, I had some of the best food. I met the CEO for Standard Chartered Bank, all of these folks in
You also met Ray Dalio.
Redalia. And even moving here and through the CEO for the former CEO for Logitech, Bracken, knowing Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, and him inviting me to some of his summer barbecue parties where I got to meet Mark Zuckerberg, like all of these folks, Terry Crews and PDD, like all these guys I grew up just seeing on TV. You can imagine, I actually didn't know what I was getting into. There was just Kadi Energy, like that was really impressive what you did there. Like, come to this barbecue. And I was like, damn, I'm the only normal, because everyone was just so famous. And I was just like, oh man. So I went in and I was just, it was hot. It was in Atherton and Ben Horowitz's house. So I was just wearing one t-shirt and you can clearly see that there's a little bit of sweat because I'm like Mark Zuckerberg is just there, just next to me, and I'm like, and Bob, the former owner for Celtics, like Will Smith, like everyone was just there, and I was just kind of just letting it soak in, and I'm bringing all of that up because obviously I was trying to change my life and people's lives with Kadi Energy, and I could talk about a lot of the impact it made for folks that used the product. But it also changed my life where I get to have a seat in all of these rooms and also talk to people that a lot of people don't have that privilege of connecting with. And even going to a place like Stanford Business School, which I looked at the acceptance rate after I was accepted. I actually didn't know. I was like, ooh, 4%. Damn. And I'm glad I didn't look at it. But I was like, if not for this problem I was trying to solve with Kadi Energy, because other than that, it's like, okay, he's smart, he did well in school. Like, what is really the wow factor? And I think that Kadi Energy story really intrigued Stanford as well. And they were like, hey, Paul, you're going to have all the resources within our community to, even if it's not Kadi Energy, we know that you're going to find a way to light up the world in your own way.
Wow. This is wild. This man, we're sitting in the presence of greatness, Paul. Like, you got to keep this going. Yeah. I'm so inspired sitting in front of you because I'm so driven by entrepreneurship. I've had my own fair share of a few problems that I've picked up and tried to solve on my own. And now, the final tip. During rapid turns, tunnel vision can be a savior. Focus on what's directly ahead, but don't forget to occasionally widen your view to see the bigger picture. This is important in your entrepreneurial journey. Now, back to the episode with Paul. But hearing your story reminds me of the unintended benefits of the problems that we decide to solve. It's funny. I was talking about this on my previous episode also, because I was telling Marvin Jones, who was my guest, that as an entrepreneur, sometimes you pick up a problem to solve.
Right.
Let's say I decide to create a beverage that helps people to enjoy their meals when they're on lunch, right. But someone else picks up my beverage that I created for people to enjoy while they're having their lunch, and they start to realize every time they have the beverage, they have a great sleep. All of a sudden, something that I created for one purpose is serving another unintended purpose, which is sort of what's happening for you, right? You decided to solve a problem in your community, and the ripple effect of that problem that you decided to solve is seen all across the world, all the way to the point where you get in front of the late Queen Elizabeth. Amazing. Amazing. So inspiring, man.
And something also to add was when the earthquake happened in Nepal, rescuers were obviously deep down, like searching for bodies and all of that. And it was really hard for them to keep their devices and their phone charged. So something that you didn't know was our African, or the energy storage solution that an African developed was actually used in Nepal during the rescue.
Wow.
Because they could charge their phones, their like walkie-talkies, and we partnered with an organization and made a few hundred units available there. And the story and the feedback was so amazing because we kind of built it for the African market. You can hit it against the wall and it's a durable
Very durable,
battery.
yeah.
And so when these guys were like, well, we have the options, or some of these Chinese options that break easily. So when they saw it and you can even hold it, they were so impressed that we sent only 60 units, and the NGO wanted like so much more that we could produce. And so we're able to ship as many of those units there as possible. So to your point, it's like sometimes when you're solving a problem, you just don't really know sometimes how big of an impact. And to me, it almost brought tears to my eyes knowing that like it's not just in Ghana, but like in a place like Nepal where there's an earthquake, which the whole world was like, wow, this is really sad. Our products being used in relief efforts, that's every entrepreneur's dream.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Keep it going. So talk about your passion for mentoring, aspiring entrepreneurs. Is there any, do you have any initiatives in mind, or, how do you approach, mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll take a step back and add something that I haven't really talked about ever. So when I moved to Colorado, one night I was with my girlfriend at that time. We're visiting a friend, and my girlfriend at that time was Hispanic, from Latin America, but white. And I knocked on my friend lives like in this neighborhood where like I couldn't see the house number, so I knocked on the wrong door, and this white guy just opened the door and pointed a gun at me. And that's actually my first time ever like seeing like gun really. And I was just lost for words because I'm like, no, like I'm just like, there's no lights on the the building number, and I was just here for a friend, and he was like, oh, you're so lucky. And that left a mark on me, and I'm sharing this story because it kind of also relates to things that I like to get involved in. And so watching that, and coming from Ghana, you don't really see some of this racial tension. And so when I experienced that in Colorado, I was like, how can I be part of the solution around Black folks and minority folks having a better representation than what the media, just because I show up and I knock on the door, I could be anyone, but this person probably just assumed that I was a Black person, so is either unemployed, like kind of trying to rob him, or yeah. So one of my friends started the Brotherhood in Colorado, and I was very actively involved in that, where we were mentoring young Black men from across Colorado. So helping review their resumes, helping them understand that there are a lot of other options for young Black men besides sports. Because everyone goes, oh, you can play basketball, football. But like, you can be a good software engineer. You can be an entrepreneur. And that experience was very humbling to me. And so now a lot of what I do is when anyone reach out to me that, hey, I'm applying to Stanford, or I'm trying to start a business, you can be assured that I'll always respond. I love, even people are like, whoa, I randomly messaged this guy and we responded. Because when I see minorities and people reaching out, I love, because I was there. So I love to always be of help. And now in the area of entrepreneurship, it's more like talking to other minority founders, like helping them think through how to fundraise effectively, helping them think through what it would take to make the shift from corporate America into entrepreneurship. And honestly, man, there's like so much I want to do for the world. And in the future, I also want to set up a fund dedicated to education. So kind of like a concept of classroom without walls, and really providing the resources for kids across Africa and the world to get the support they need to explore more things outside of the classroom. Because I think that is how you nurture that entrepreneurial spirit. Because when you're growing up, it's like, go to school, I read the books. But if these kids have computers to play with, like if they can enroll in other, things and programs that will enable them to build that entrepreneurial ethos, I think that would be amazing. So it's just a matter of time, and I just want to get to that point where I have the resources to make that happen. And also in the future, I also want to, do more angel investments. So have enough resources to like actually maybe start my own venture fund, focus on Africa, and focus not on like just every VC is putting money into fintech in Africa, but like, could there be a next evolution of entrepreneurship where people are using the concept of entrepreneurship to solve some of the biggest infrastructure problems across Africa? Roads, space, internet connectivity. Yeah, moving money and mobile, that's the first step. But I think it's going to take a lot of mentorship and more resources to get more entrepreneurs to think about tackling even bigger problems.
Yeah. Wow. Man. My next question for you was going to be, what do you want your legacy to be? But you've just laid it all out. You've laid it all out already. So I don't even have to ask that question. But the next thing that comes to my mind is you're so inspirational. You're so driven. When Paul runs low, when your battery is almost negative, how do you recharge? How do you refuel to refocus, because you're into so many different things and you're solving so many impactful problems, which, man, the pressure can weigh a ton. So how do you recharge yourself to keep going?
Yeah, I think, and it's really important for every entrepreneur to figure out like how to recharge. Because when you don't, it's really hard to build a company. For me, it's kind of funny, but I love watching funny comedy skits on YouTube from back home, Ghana, Nigeria. And people are like, I've talked to people about this. Well, that sounds sort of, I'm like, just being able to smile and laugh for 10 seconds just makes my day so much better. So for someone, it could be meditation. For me, it's like the jokes from home just puts me in a very positive energy where it's easier for me to recharge and get things going. And also, like, you probably have very similar experience where when you live away from home for so long, you just have your own playbook in terms of how to, when you have your family here, you can afford to be sad and go home and your mom is like, what's going on? Like, cheer you up. But when you have family away from home, you have to look inside to recharge, to, get yourself always in that positive mindset. And so I always like to go on a 1 hour walk every day. I always have to remind myself that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I always love this saying, when it rains, it pours. Always constantly thinking about like, your time is going to come. Because when I was also running like Kadi Energy for like 6 years, and we didn't raise venture at all. We didn't raise venture money. It was not the happiest moment. Obviously, we bootstrap it, and I'm happy, and I'm glad we did that. But like now, I'm fortunate enough to have raised venture money, right? And so it's all about timing, and I feel like just being in that mindset where you can relax, smile a little bit more, and understand that it's a journey just makes it so much, always, and also talking to other folks, talking to other entrepreneurs. Like, I have my support system. We have people that I'm like, I can call them anytime and they can call me anytime. And we just kind of like each other's, therapist, and all of that really helped. But the point to take here is that entrepreneurship is takes such an emotional toll on you that like it's really important that you find a blueprint or a playbook for how you manage your lows.
Yeah. Wow. How you manage the lows. It's, Martin Luther King's famous saying is your character is really tested, not when you're high, but when you're in your lows. And so, man, we're pushing almost 2 hours, and I bet you we could literally just keep going. But, man, this has been such a great conversation. So one question that I like to ask every single guest on this podcast is, what is your definition of wealth?
I think for me, wealth is basically like, for me, like a sum of all the resources I have available to me. So financial resources, social resources, all blended into one. So when I think about my personal wealth, I don't look at it only in the monetary part. I also look at knowing folks like you, because those are all things that people don't add when they're thinking about wealth. So, social output, emotional wealth too. Just being able to be in that mental space where I can build, even being healthy. So wealth is, to me, a sum total of all of those things.
Wow. That's a good one. That's a impressive one. I like that so much. Man, Paul, is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that maybe I haven't asked you about yet, but you wanted to talk about?
I think we've covered it all. I mean, it's been 2 hours.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh man.
I think we covered it all.
All right. So if any of my listeners are wondering, okay, Paul is a bright guy. I want to connect with Paul. I want to continue this conversation with Paul. Yeah. How can they reach out?
I'm on all social media. I'm on Facebook, Politics00. And I actually have an entrepreneurial page that has over 15,000 people that I once in a while share nuggets around entrepreneurship. And I love LinkedIn, so if you send me a request, I'm always there. Or like Instagram as well, like Politics00. Twitter, Politics00. And I'm always open to talk to folks about entrepreneurship, about living in different Ghana, Hong Kong, US. Those are very different cultures, and And yeah, so I'm always open to having a conversation with people and just seeing how I can be helpful. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Man, Paul, thank you so much for, number one, making yourself available to be on our podcast today. I really, really appreciate your time.
Of course.
And I want to give a major shout out to Daniel for, I mean, it was serendipity, right? We didn't even plan to meet up, and we all met up. And I'm so happy that I met you, man, because you're such an inspirational guy. And I think my listeners are very, very fortunate to have you on the podcast today, sharing so much knowledge and also being very open with us, sharing some stories that you've never shared before. We really appreciate you doing that. And so it's been a pleasure.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. It's a wrap. Thanks so much.
All right.
Hey there. Well done for listening up to this point. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.